Welcome to our final session in our Creative Escape Summer Series. I am Ann Cavallo, Assistant Vice Provost and Director of the Center for Research on Teaching and Learning Excellence, here with Dr. Andrew Clark, Associate Director. Today's session is Science as a Verb for Aspiring Teachers in Engineering Design with Dr. Greg Hale of the College of Science and Dr. Melanie Sattler of the College of Engineering. First, I would like to present Interim Provost Dr. Pranesh Aswath to give a welcome. Dr. Aswath.
Thank you, Dr. Cavallo, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm very thankful that this whole series of seminars that have been held over the summer have been so well attended. It's been an incredible opportunity for us to share the great work that our faculty are doing on our campus and perhaps provide some relief from the normal COVID-19 news that comes in every day and share something more interesting and scientific. And I think it's been a great opportunity to welcome stakeholders, not just from UT Arlington, but also from the community to participate. And I'm very thankful for Dr. Cavallo and Dr. Clark for spearheading this effort over the summer. We have two great faculty from UT Arlington here today, Dr. Greg Hale and Dr. Melanie Sattler, both of whom I know very well and come from a STEM background. So this is going to be very interesting for us as STEM educators. And I know Dr. Cavallo as a STEM educator would find this particularly interesting. So thank you all for being here today and for joining this very interesting talk about science as a verb and engineering design. So I hope you have a wonderful meeting today and enjoy the presentation from Dr. Hale and Dr. Sattler. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aswath. We appreciate that. And next on the agenda, as you can see that I've posted, we will have our two speakers. First, Dr. Greg Hale, who will present Science as a Verb for Aspiring Teachers. And then Dr. Melanie Sattler, who will speak on Everyday Engineering STEM at Home. After that, we'll have discussion and Q&A. In the chat, you will see that there's a box with a question mark in it. Put all your questions there, and we will utilize that and read those questions to the presenters during our Q&A and or during their session if they have planned interaction. And then we will have a couple of closing slides and we'll send you off. So we'll get started right now. We'll have Dr. Hale with his presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hey, welcome everybody. As has been said, my name's Greg Hale. I'm an Assistant Dean of the College of Science here at UTA. And aside from those duties, I'm a co-director of the UTeach Arlington replication here at our university. And so what I'm going to be talking about relates to that aspect of my work. UTeach Arlington is a replication of a program started at UT Austin in the late 90s in an effort to produce more science and math teachers. Universities in general and in Texas in particular were not producing very large numbers of science and math teachers, and they took it upon themselves to collaborate with the College of Ed and kind of the original gangster OG of UTeach in Austin is in the College of Science there, Michael Martyr, and they designed a program meant to entice and recruit science and math majors into teaching. The program has been very successful in increasing numbers of science and math teachers produced at universities. We started our replication in 2010. We were something like university number 11 or 12 in the replication process, and there are now 45 universities across the country that utilize this model. So the gist of the model is, well, let's find people who are good at science and math and see if they might just want to try out teaching. The beginning of the UTeach program is just called Step 1 and Step 2, and they're just low anxiety, even low credit hour, just a couple credit hour courses where students get an opportunity to go into the classroom and see if they like it. And if they do, things get more serious from there, and they learn about, why they were asked to structure the lessons they were delivering in those classes the way they were. But as you can see, it is a commitment. If somebody decides they do want to do this, it's designed for there to be one UTeach element every semester until they graduate in 4 years. And so what that does is prevent most students who are in UTeach from participating in another thing that we value in science, which is research. But if you notice, there's one course in that sequence which is called Research Methods. Understanding how science is done is important enough that for these folks that are probably not going to be able to squeeze it into their schedule as they're with us as an undergrad, we wanted them to get a good idea of what it is to practice science, not to learn about it, but to actually do science, hence science is a verb. And so that one class tries to take them through a miniature version of a multi-semester undergraduate student research experience, from coming up with design with questions, to designing experiments to answer those questions, collecting data, analyzing it, and then writing papers and sharing presentations with their classmates. So that course, designed by the, again, OG of UTeach, Michael Martyr at UT Austin, starts with a miniature version of the miniature version. So it's the first day after you go over the rules and the syllabus. There's a short activity that is meant to, get the students into the frame of mind for how do you practice science. And if we were together, I'd hand out a big bag of balloons right now. If you do have balloons at home, this would be a great opportunity for you to go grab one. Maybe they're left over from a birthday party a couple months back. Grab one, blow it up. It doesn't matter how big you blow it up. Just grab a balloon and blow it up and tie it off. So I'll hand these balloons out in my course and tell them nothing except please blow up the balloon. And then once they've all done that, including the handful of folks who never got the hang of tying off the end or helped by their seatmates, I give them a brief safety talk about please don't pop balloons near people's heads, eardrums, etc. And they then do pop the balloons. And I ask them to pop them in such a way as they don't pop at the same time as their neighbor, so that they can keep track of the shrapnel, the balloon bits. And so now, since I couldn't hand balloons out to everyone here in attendance, I took the liberty of going into the lab and inflating those balloons and then popping them with those various implements that were in the room, which is what the students would do. Bonus points for anybody who can guess what year the building was renovated based upon the color of the countertop. Okay. So this is the evidence that they collect. So each individual student would have their own balloon shrapnel, and I asked them what I'm going to ask you to do right now, which is to make some observations about what they see. Now I have pictures of each of the 5 sets of shrapnel. I'll cycle through those in just a second. So you'll have time to look at each set of balloon bits more closely. And I'll let I think I'll count to 20 and move on. So you'll get about 20 seconds to look at each set of balloon bits and just jot down some observations, and please type them into the Q&A. All right, and I'll collect the suggestions, or the observations, I should say, and type them in to the screen once everybody's had a chance to generate some and and share their observations. So make, maybe 3 or 4 observations, if you would, about the balloon bits, and I'll start cycling through. So that's the implement I used to break that particular balloon, and that's what that balloon's bits look like. Okay, moving on to balloon 2. And 3. Four. Okay, look closely. What do you see on the edges? Number 5. Okay. Excuse me, on this one, you can see, looks like a little bit of white powder even. Okay, I'm going to share with you an observation that wasn't obvious from those pictures, and that's because it took me so long to tape down those pieces that all the rubber was dry by the time I took the pictures. But they were a little bit slimy to start with too, a little bit damp. Okay, and so let me exit presentation mode so I can type. So slimy, I'm looking back through comments that were have been posted, and keep them coming, please. Okay, so we have 2 or 3 pieces. Okay, we have different sizes for the shrapnel. Okay, looking through. Okay, so other observations that typically are made. I asked about the edges. If you look back, see, that's pretty good. Those edges, here's some more edges. They've got this kind of scalloped pattern to it. They aren't straight. The edges have these waves or scallop shapes. All right, so somebody is, the last comment actually beat me to the punch. That's my next request of you is to go from observations to generating some questions. Okay. What kind of questions do you have based upon those observations do you have some questions that you could investigate? If you were going to make the next couple hours of your life some kind of a study to figure out the behavior of these balloons, what kind of questions would be of interest to you to figure out? So we have questions about the balloon material. And I will say that the balloons they all came from the same manufacturer, same bag. They only differed in terms of color, as best I could tell. And yes, the objects that pierced them were different. So what kind of questions, if you were to make an investigation, could you pursue? Okay, so one's been posted here about the particular source of the popping. Okay, so let's say the popping instrument. In that case, it was a dart. Does that affect the edge shape? So there's a question. So the observation was the dart seems to have the cleaner, straighter edges. So the broader question would be, does the thing you use to pop the balloon affect the shape of the edges? The distance traveled. All right, so distance relative to what? What are you asking about that would affect the distance traveled? And I'm sorry, I can't have the PowerPoint in full screen mode because then I can't type. Okay, so just a question like, how far do the bits travel? Isn't as useful a question for us as how does something, fill in the blank, affect how far the bits travel? This is something that we can operationalize. Okay. So in terms of the bits traveling, does anybody have anything that they'd like to? So size of balloons, thanks. All right. So how does, we can say I have to get rid of these underlines, I think. Yeah. How does the volume of the balloon, the size you blew it up to? Okay, so we could design an investigation around that question, especially if we spell balloon right. Okay, so other questions. Okay, so I'll also put this in the second column of questions here. Type of popper. Does it affect the loudness? Now, I did not record these, so I can't tell you how many decibels each balloon popped with, but yes, that would be something that could be investigated. Okay, so now we've got, I'm afraid in an effort to kind of nudge things along with my limited time here, I may have influenced people's questions. These are all excellent. So the size or diameter, take your pick, however you want to measure it. Does it affect the shapes? That one, okay. Let me go ahead and put that over here. How does diameter influence shapes of the shrapnel? Okay, I think that one is a good one to illustrate the difference between the kinds of questions that are posted here. And I can go back to full screen temporarily for this bit. These kinds of questions, especially questions that if anybody had asked one that started with why, those kind of questions I would categorize over here on the left-hand side as kind of these curiosity questions or bigger questions. Whereas we can't design a single experiment that can shed a whole lot of light on it though. So how does diameter influence the shapes of the shrapnel? We'd have to get a little bit more specific. We'd probably have to design a handful of experiments with more specific questions like we have on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, these questions all involve how does one thing affect another thing? Right? How does one aspect, one element, one property of the balloon affect some other property of the balloon, and even better, one that we can measure? Okay, so this is, sorry, I forgot that clicking now changes my screen. But this is the realm where we live in science, is in service of some bigger question. We have to study smaller ones, gather as much evidence as we can, analyze it, and see if what kind of answer it gives us towards our bigger questions. So in terms of designing an experiment around, does the popping instrument affect edge shape? That one's a little harder to quantify, but second one and the third one are really, second and third one are really easy to turn into measurable, testable questions. So you can imagine designing an experiment, and this would be the last step with my students. I'd ask them, now, how would you design an experiment? Just in 5 or 6 bullet points, tell me what steps you would carry out. All right, so how does the volume of the balloon affect how far the bits travel? Probably blow up 15 balloons. 5 small ones, try to get them as equal as possible. 5 medium-sized ones, again, try to get them as equal as possible. And 5 really large ones. Okay. Get out a tape measure, get out a popping instrument, just one, okay, and pop away, measuring how far the furthest bit travels. Collect your data. Measure those inches, or if you prefer the metric system, measure those centimeters. Average it out for the 3 different sets of 5 balloons, and you can start drawing some conclusions. If you've got a smartphone, you can measure with a 30-second download of a free app how many decibels are created, decibels of loudness from each balloon. You can do the same kind of thing. So if anybody out there is either A, normally a classroom teacher, or B, during COVID times, much more of a teacher than they used to be at home with their own children, if you want to, in 20 minutes or so, introduce your student or child who is temporarily your student to the scientific method and designing experiments and isolating variables, so you're only changing one and measuring its effect on another. This can be a fun and surprisingly effective, maybe even sneakily effective way to get that across. All right, so I will pause and take questions if there are any, or cede my time to Dr. Sattler.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hale. Appreciate that. And if you have questions, more questions, please do put them in the chat. And then at the end, we will read through them, and have Dr. Hale and Dr. Sattler respond according to the question. But right now, we will turn it over to Dr. Sattler, who will speak about everyday engineering STEM at home. So, Dr. Sattler.
This dovetails very well with Dr. Hale's talk and what he was mentioning at the end, because I'm going to give you some ideas of things that you can do at home with your family to explore engineering while we're stuck at home more than we normally are. So what do engineers do? Well, engineers help people by creating and designing devices, technology, and infrastructure that improve people's lives. So it's all about helping people. You see the engineer on the left designing a building, and the engineer on the right working with wind turbines to provide clean energy. So things that people need. So I'd like to share some websites that you can go to find activities to do with your family. So the first one is DiscoverE. So the E is for engineering. And we'll click on the website, and they have a number of activities that you can do at home. So here's keep a cube, make a container to keep an ice cube from melting. They've also got some classroom activities, but if you keep on scrolling down, there's a flight test. Design a plane that glides down a zip line the fastest. There's human computer coding without computers. Program a human robot to build a pyramid of cups in as few steps as possible. They've even got make a TV. So some interesting activities that you can check out. The second site is where I borrowed the title from, Everyday Engineering STEM at Home. This is American Society of Civil Engineers, and I especially recommend the Dream Big video. So we go to the site, and they also have activities that you can do. They've adapted them to home versions. So we've got daylight in a bottle, build a better bubble blower, water pollution cleanup. And if you keep on scrolling down, you'll get to what to watch. And this is Dream Big, Engineering Our World. It actually was in IMAX theaters a couple of years ago, so some of you may have seen it, but you can rent it for $3.99 for 48 hours or $9.99 to keep, and it's really worth it. So we're gonna watch the trailer.
Every ancient structure and modern masterpiece reflects the dreams of visionary people. The engineers who realize the impossible. And protect us from danger. Follow extraordinary engineers who have devoted their lives to keeping us safe and solving tomorrow's challenges. The world is at our fingertips. Meet the next generation of dreamers who will shape our future, powered only by imagination. The joy of engineering the future belongs to the young. What better time to start dreaming big? MacGillivray Freeman's Dream Big, a film for IMAX and giant screen theaters.
So hopefully that piqued your interest. Please do check it out. The next website I've listed, Try Engineering, has games on it. It also has activities. If your youngster is into Minecraft or Fortnite or games like that, these are a little bit less exciting, unfortunately, but they are engineering related games. Next site, Engineer Girl. So this has a lot of activities that girls and boys can try. Project MC Squared. I put this one on the list because it has a really neat Netflix series that goes with it. So the Netflix series is teenage girls become secret agents who use science and tech skills to save the day. So the Netflix series is really well done. It is free if you have Netflix. However, I'll warn you that the website itself is a little bit commercial. They're trying to sell toys, but they also do have some experiments that you can do without buying their toys. And the final one is SciGirls Connect. And so it's science, but it also has some engineering activities. And the activity we're going to do is an engineering activity that comes from that site, Parachute Parade. So let's go ahead and click on it. And here's the website. Parachute Parade is the first activity. And if you click on it, you'll get an introductory screen. And we're going to do the version that says download the activity for families. So I already downloaded that, and here it is. The skydivers rely on parachutes to slow them down as they fall from frightening heights. Parachutes catch air and create drag. Okay, so that's a key word. They create drag, a force that works against gravity. So drag is basically friction with the air. Parachutes are usually large, so that's another key word, and made of lightweight materials. So lightweight, another key word. So they create the most drag possible without adding a lot of weight. Hone your family's engineering skills, create a parachute that helps a toy minifigure reach the ground safely. So here's what you need. And I've got some of these items here. So the first bullet point is what you're going to make the parachute itself from. So I've got some paper towels here, and I've also got coffee filters. Then you need a toy minifigure. So I've got a Lego Friends figure. You need string or thread. So we've got some pink thread, scissors, tape, and then if you're going to do a design ahead of time, you need paper and pencil to do that. So if we go to the next steps, there's a mentor moment here where you can read about a NASA engineer. And there's a pointer here. This activity is great for practicing the skill of changing only one thing or one variable at a time. Some variables to consider are material choice, parachute size, length of the string. Remember to keep everything the same except the one variable you're testing. So the challenge then is to make a parachute for the toy minifigure that descends the slowest using only the materials provided. And you can take 10 minutes to brainstorm designs before you begin. So I'm going to take a paper towel here, and I pre-made some of these to save time, but what I did was just took a scissor and poked holes in the paper towel to make holes for the thread to go through. So I poked 4 holes, so 1 in each corner if it's a square shape. And then I took the thread and just threaded it through the hole and then tied it on. So no special kind of knot, just a regular tying it on. All right, so then cut the thread, and one of the variables that you can test if you want to is the length of the string or the thread. So here I've got one that I already attached the 4 threads. And so I've got one on each corner. And you could tie these 4 together, but I just taped them. I figured it would be faster and easier to tape them. So brought the 4 together and have a piece of Scotch tape and just taped the threads together. And then you could tie the threads to the figure if you wanted, or you can tape it. So I thought it was easier just to tape the threads. All right, so here we have a large square paper towel parachute. So I'll show you the other ones that I made. So I wanted to test the effect of the material. Right? So one of the things that you try to do is keep all the variables the same except for one. So I've got 2 parachutes that are the same size, but one is paper towel and the other one is coffee filter. And actually these have a little bit of a different shape too, because the coffee filter was folded into a filter shape. But then the next thing I wanted to test was the effective size. So we've got paper towel, we've got both circles, but one is smaller, one's larger. And then finally, the effective shape. So we've got the paper towel and we've got another paper towel, and they're approximately the same size, but one is a circle and the other one's a square. So my daughter was gracious enough to help me out and took pictures of me dropping these because it'd be hard for me to drop them and get it into the camera so you could see it. So we've got the first set here with exploring the effective materials. So this is the paper towel versus the coffee filter. So we've got the paper towel on the left and the coffee filter on the right. So you have to watch. Uh-oh. Okay, so I was gonna try to stop it before they hit the ground. Let me go back and see if I can do that because it goes by really fast. Okay, there they are in the air. I stopped it a little too soon. Okay, so there you can see it. This is a shadow, but here is the paper towel and it's already hit the floor, and here's the coffee filter. So the coffee filter was a better parachute. So then you can ask why. And the factors that are important are the weight and the size, right? So the coffee filter is actually a little lighter than the paper towel. And they're the same size, right? So that wasn't a factor. But we did mention that the coffee filter has a little bit of a different shape because it was pre-shaped. And so that actually may have helped it in being slower. So second thing we want to look at is the effective size. So here's where we have the small versus the large paper towel. Okay, so we got the small one on the left and the large one on the right. Okay, so here they are going down. You can see that the small one's going down faster than the large one. And small one's already hit the ground out of the shot here, but then there's the large one. So large one made the better parachute. And oh, I forgot to ask y'all to predict which one you thought was going to be better. Sorry about that. And I gave it away already. But the larger parachute has bigger area. And so it has more contact with the air and creates more friction or more drag with the air. So if you're doing this at home with your family, you can ask the family members to predict which one is going to be the better parachute. So then the third thing we want to look at is the effect of the shape. Okay, so here we go. We've got the square one on the left and the round one on the right. And so you can predict which one you think is going to be the better parachute. So let's take a look. And they hit the ground at approximately the same time. So shape didn't matter. All right, and that's what I had. So I think Dr. Hale and I are both available to answer questions at this point.
So thank you to Dr. Hale and Dr. Sattler. And so if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and they'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks. I also wanted to thank you both again. The common theme that came up with both Dr. Hale's presentation and yours, Dr. Sattler, was the controlling of variables, which is really important in science, and of course science and engineering, and they're very that's my field, so they're very dear to me and to my heart, and it's really important in this day and age to really think about the evidence and focus on evidence that you presented, both of you, and to use that evidence to support your theories. So thank you again, Dr. Hale and Dr. Sattler. So what questions do we have? Are there any already in the chat we might read through? Take a look.
If anybody's looking for maybe an outside the box, unexpected place to see that variable isolation and application of the scientific method without using that word very much, there's two places to look. One, Mythbusters is great. They spend a lot of time welding rigs and stabilizing things so that there's the only variable that's changing from run to run of their experiment is the thing that they're planning on. And my condolences go out to Grant Imahara's family. If anybody, anybody in the extended Mythbusters family is still feeling that loss. Any show where they're fixing cars, right, where they're trying to figure out what's wrong with an engine. There's lots of isolation of variables going on there.
Yeah. And one of the things, is it sure makes me want to go back in the classroom and teach again, because how fun is it to be able to do this all day? So that's what you get to do if you decide to be a science or engineering teacher, is you get to do experiments with your students all day long. So, and
not experiments on your students.
Yes. Correct. But it's so much fun, and I used to do all these with my own children as they're growing up, and then of course as a teacher we get to do these kinds of things, and it's just really a joy. So love science, love engineering. So we do have something in the chat, but it might be back. You may have answered it about the relationship of the size and diameter of the piercing object and resulting shape of the shrapnel. Did you answer that yet, Dr. Hale?
Yeah, that was one of the suggested questions that we took into account thinking through the balloon stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if anybody's wondering if they've got a particular thing they're trying to work on with their students, your school is not going to open in person for a few weeks. Chime in, ask for suggestions. We've got at least 3 people here who can probably point you in a decent direction.
Okay.
This is an excellent demonstration of what I find the hardest thing about inquiry-based learning and collaborative learning is being quiet and standing in the corner and waiting. I hate that part of the job. I'm such a good explainer. But just be quiet, wait. But I hopefully I think we're running out of. I think we're not going to get a question.
Well, Dr. Hale, what other kind of experiments do you do in your classes with your students?
Well, everything else is designed by the students in that particular course. So I can tell you we get a lot of people who had been in a plant science class fairly recently. So lots of people have ideas about how to grow plants better, cheaper, grosser. Yeah, some have been gross. So they'll change the way that they fertilize. Some of the more interesting ones, I had a student in that course who had a father that runs it was an auto shop, but it was a tuning. They specialized in tuning cars for more horsepower. So her father had a rolling road and a horsepower way to measure horsepower. So she was changing the air intake variables and seeing how it affected the horsepower of a car. Had another student who did one of his experiments on speed of bullets because he was a competitive shooter, and he changed the way he loaded his bullets. I believe he was using the same amount of gunpowder but moving its location forward and aft, changing the balance of the bullet and seeing how that affected the speed. So that was good, and he did not do that in the lab, so he did that in his regular range. And we haven't had anybody bring any weapons to the lab yet, but I did have somebody who was an archer, an archery coach. So she did arrows, and again, at a specific facility, not in our building. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So students have designed some very interesting experiments over the years. We have a question that came in.
Yeah, it's they said thank you for the engaging presentation, which we agree with. But will the engineering at home websites be made available? And yes, we will put the presentation, the links. I think probably on our website, the Sattler website. But Dr. Sattler, you can make it available too.
So, yes, we will plan to make it available. So we'll put it in the chat, and then we can also put it on the Sattler website.
Okay. Yeah, if you can put it in the chat, that would be great. Can you both, I think, talk about the importance of sort of demystifying, if you will, science and engineering? Because I was sort of struck with what you were talking about, Dr. Hale, about about MythBusters and about car shows and that kind of stuff. It's not just about, like you said, it's not just about building engines. It's not just about cars. It's about isolating variables, and it's about showing the kids that it's not just about these complex equations or whatever, but it is something that's tangible and real, and like you said, sort of demystifying it.
Well, it's really kind of boils down to curiosity, and so and engineering and science diverge a little bit in terms of are you trying to find initial knowledge? Science is trying to push the envelope and see. Science is you learn as you be probably junior, senior year of college. Science becomes less about what you know and more and more, and eventually all about what you do not know. And it's trying to shed light on that. Now, engineers are experts in taking what's already known and using it to solve a problem. So people who have very much solve a particular problem mindset, and with whatever tools you can manage to cobble together, but you're all about solving a problem. Engineering is probably a good fit for you. You probably already like to take stuff apart and tinker and make things better. Scientists are more focused on the pursuit of understanding and figuring out you know, and then we tried to replicate it a little bit with the balloons. You know, there was something that just seemed weird about those balloons. It wasn't what you expected, and pushing and probing in those spots where, whether it's, you know, it happens all the time. You don't see actual scientists breaking balloons very much, although people who study things like fracture and earthquakes do somewhat similar research. But that kind of inspiration happens when you're reading something that somebody across the world has published, and it's an area you're interested in. You read it. They did this experiment, and they've got data to back it up, but they got a result that just does not make sense to you. You know, everything you've learned about that topic, you know, the last 15 years of your life, it doesn't make sense. Now, it doesn't mean that you think the other person is wrong. It just means there's something else going on there. And that's the kind of inspiration that will guide the next 6 months of work in somebody's research lab, is scratching that itch that just doesn't make sense to me. I need to figure out an experiment that'll shed a little more light. And then that experiment will also probably not have results that make perfect sense. And so science is almost an exercise in chasing your tail, where the results, you design an experiment to give results A or B, and you get Q. And you have to figure out, well, all right, what didn't I take into account when I designed my experiment? There are more variables. There's something that I don't have a handle on. So if that kind of pursuit is of interest to you, then kind of experimental science is perhaps a fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And the thinking processes involved are valuable. They're so valuable for young people to develop. And that's why in UTeach and in all of our programs where we prepare teachers, we really focus on helping to develop the thinking abilities that they'll take with them for the rest of their lives. Because even though popping a balloon, I mean, just who thinks of those things? Well, scientists do. So just going through that process, and of the parachutes, like that process of controlling variables and thinking through an experiment develops skills of the mind that will last a lifetime. So it's really important that we start at a young age, and that's what we do in our UTeach program and in all of our teacher education program, and of course at UTA with our college students. So it's a great time to really develop those kinds of thinking abilities that will stay with them forever.
One of the things I meant to mention that I forgot to mention is on the slide that talked about what engineers do, and it said create. So there's a lot of creativity involved, and I think that we normally associate creativity with the arts, right? But in engineering, you're trying to make something better, and or solve a problem, and that requires creativity. And so, it's not just memorizing something out of a book. And like Dr. Hale said, I think sometimes the way we teach science and maybe engineering too is not optimal, because it's better when you can get the students to think like a scientist, think like an engineer, and that involves designing experiments and using creativity too. And it's something that I think kids naturally have a lot of curiosity, right? So why does this work? Why does this happen, right? And if we can keep that alive in the way that we teach the subjects, it's a lot more interesting. And then I think that the students end up as better scientists and engineers, because that's what it's about, is about that thought process rather than memorizing information.
It was interesting that you used a Lego friend too. I've got a young son who likes nothing better than to not just follow the directions, but then to take everything apart and to see what he can build. And so his most recent thing is trying to build safe, where he can put his pocket money and hide, or else build candy dispenser machines where he can try and get money from his brothers and sisters. So, but that's the kind of thing that I think, we've often said to him, think about engineering. He doesn't know what engineering is. He's only 10, but we said, it's a gift to be inquisitive like that and to be able to create.
Mm-hmm. Really, it's the process of play in a way, what you're describing, and that's how they develop the creative skills and the knowledge, and they test things out themselves automatically. We do that our entire lives. It's how we learn, and to see what works and what doesn't work. So it really is something we maybe don't do enough of, is just letting the students kind of play and try things out. And it really does helps them enjoy the subject more, helps them learn more and want to learn more. And that curiosity that Dr. Sattler and Dr. Hale talked about is really something we should capitalize on as teachers and use in our teaching. So thank you. Are there any questions, any other from the audience? Well, we definitely want to, again, thank our presenters. We have our contact information about our programs here. If you would like to reach Dr. Hale, there's his contact information, and want to know more about UTeach and how to become a science or math teacher, or please contact Dr. Hale. And Dr. Sattler, if you're interested in engineering. And also, any information you would like to know about the center, or any contacts you would like to have on our campus, please contact us at the Center for Research on Teaching and Learning Excellence, and there's our email. So we do want to thank you for this Creative Escape Summer Program. Again, I'm Dr. Ann Cavallo, and with Dr. Andrew Clark, and I also want to give a special shout out to Joshua Shin and Sean Sandlin, our student interns who have helped us through this series and have done a great job. So thank you very much for attending, and we will have this and all of our Creative Escapes recordings posted on our website. So thank you.
Thank you all.